to this week's Movie Math, where the Martin Luther King Jr. holiday weekend was a bloodbath. And last year, things were perfectly pleasant. Look at this. Ride Along 2 debuted with 41 million. The Revenant enjoyed a 6% hold, pulling in another 37.5 million. The Force Awakens, just a 22% dip. Many weekends into its run with another 33 that it added. Look at that top three, 41, 37.5, and 33. And then 13 Hours, the Benghazi movie from Michael Bay, opened with 19.2. But this year, the top movie came in at 20 million, whereas the worst faring one last year came in at that number. What happened? Well, I think this is a perfect way to see how much the movie industry has changed in just a year. Oh, it's so depressing. Okay, all right, so you have a very lackluster awards season this year where it's really just the La La Land show. Very few other films have gotten any kind of boost. And, coming out of the Golden Globes, La La Land won every single category it was nominated in. So they're really Moonlight got a little bit of action, but they're holding the expansion of Moonlight until the Oscar nominations because they feel they're going to get a little bit more traction there. It'll be a little bit of a bigger deal. So and you'll see that La La Land is doing well. So that's one problem, the very bad awards season this year. Then Rotten Tomatoes kills movies dead this year. They're like one of those pesticide ads. Stops movies in their tracks. And it's true. And we're going to look at some Rotten Tomato scores later for Live by Night and Silence. Live by Night, Silence did okay. Not for a Martin Scorsese film, but Live by Night, definitely sprayed with Rotten Tomatoes. Then, I know that you guys like to say, a lot of you really don't want to admit that movie stars still exist, but as I always quote Paul Newman, this is the second time today I've quoted Paul Newman about this, the right actor in the right role is priceless. And last year you had Leonardo DiCaprio and Kevin Hart doing what they do best, and they brought in the money. This year, you don't really have any star power in play. And then also TV has gotten very aggressive. This weekend we had Netflix's A Series of Unfortunate Events, drop the whole season. Sneaky Pete over on Amazon. And then also The Young Pope over on HBO debuted on Sunday night. And also it did 2 days in a row. So it did Sunday and Monday, really taking advantage of the holiday weekend. So it wasn't pretty. But luckily, the top of the box office does feature 3 success stories. So let's start out on a positive note. All right, so Hidden Figures, this is the 3-day, not the 4-day. Hidden Figures, I think because with the 4-day it gets complicated. The percentages are too inflated because you're comparing it to 3 days the weekend prior. So anyway, even though it was a 4-day holiday weekend, that's supposed to make more people want to go to the movies. So anyway, Hidden Figures had an 8.6% hold. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Last weekend we talked about that it would be lucky to have somewhere from 25 to 30% of a hold based on similar films, The Help, The Butler, and 42. It had an 8.6% hold, under 10%. That's amazing. I think it benefited partially from a lack of competition, but still, this is really fantastic for Hidden Figures. It's already outgrossed Fences, and it's also outgrossed, speaking of Martin Luther King Jr., Selma, Ava DuVernay's film that also, I think, was not quite the awards contender that many hoped or felt that it should be. Hidden Figures is getting noms here and there. It did very well at the SAG Awards, so that could speak well for Oscars because actors are the biggest group of Academy voters. But still, it's not quite the awards contender that I think and many others think it should be. But it's, I think, well on its way, hopefully to passing the century mark. That first test of success, first badge of honor for a movie. And also this shows that, like The Help, The Butler, and 42, all movies that went past the century mark, there's a certain type of film emerging. I would probably I wouldn't put The Blind Side in there because The Blind Side really focused so much on Sandra Bullock. But, a film that appeals to both African American and Caucasian audiences. It's a feel-good movie. I mean, you can certainly see a certain type of movie emerging there. And Hollywood does love its formulas, and they're very good at repeating them. So so Hidden Figures, I think, definitely fits in that category. But it's one of the stronger of the group because of that hold. That hold's amazing. None of those three films enjoyed that hold. Then La La Land got a huge Golden Globes boost. It again won every single category it was nominated in, and a number of people watching or reading about the awards ceremony the day after said, well, I got to see this thing now, and see it they did. Lionsgate took advantage of the heat and added 333 theaters, putting it almost 2,000 theaters. That's very solid. It's still on the low side for a wide release these days, though. But anyway, it's a 43% jump. Bam! Right? Talk about a catchy tune. It's up to 74 million domestic and 132 million worldwide. Now, ironically, this could end up maybe hurting La La Land when it comes to the Best Picture race for the Oscars. People might feel, well, it has the Golden Globe wins, it's got a wonderful box office haul that it can, be proud of, and I'm sure it's going to get some Oscars. It's a strong contender for director, for original music, right? Song, Ryan Gosling, Emma Stone. But picture, Moonlight is a strong competitor with it, and the Academy might say, well, you know what? La La Land's already had its day in the sun. Moonlight needs the boost. And Moonlight's only at 14.6 million total. Historically, the lower grossing movies have won the day when it comes to Best Picture. There are exceptions, of course, but still, this works in Moonlight's favor. So we'll see what happens. Also, Moonlight's going to, again, expand after the Oscar nominations are announced on a week from today, Tuesday, January 24th. So maybe it's never going to catch up to La La Land, but still, that's an interesting thing to see, all the different factors that go into how awards voters decide where to cast their vote. Then Sing continues to do very, very well, just a 33% drop at its fourth weekend. And it's actually passed Moana domestically. So that's a very big win. Well, it's a moderate win, actually, for Illumination Entertainment over at Universal, because while it's passed Moana domestically, it lags $100 million behind Moana overseas in the foreign box office. So Moana is higher when it comes to worldwide grosses for the year. But still, that's an accomplishment for Sing. And as some of you have been pointing out to me, it never reached number one. But it just hung in there at number 2 and number 3 and has made quite a bit of money. Now the horror stories. All right, so speaking of horror stories, the best performer amongst the new releases was The Bye Bye Man. Never bet against horror. The horror genre is incredibly potent. It almost always does well at the box office. These movies are very inexpensive to make. Just $7.4 million budget for The Bye Bye Man. And people turn up. They're a great, I think sci-fi is catching up in terms of people's first movies and how to break into the biz. But horror, and also Cabin in the Woods was kind of a sci-fi horror mix, so I guess that was like cutting edge, right? But still, Bye Bye Man, it's a surprise, but not too surprising that it ended up being the best performer of the new releases. Then right after that, you can see that Rogue One took a little bit more of a tumble than The Force Awakens at this stage of release. Rogue One is in its 5th weekend, and it fell almost 40%. But you know what? Tomato. I think that, Rogue One's going to get to be, it's going to join $1 billion, like literally any day now. And that's a success for Disney and Lucasfilm. Why it's not a $2 billion movie? Well, it's not an episode, it's a standalone story. Well, it's not a standalone, but it's a prequel spin-off. It's not integral to the story going forward. It's not the first one back with this new era of Star Wars. And also, I think that there was no really strong lead. They put out Jyn Erso, then they took her back because they were like, that's not going over very well. But they never really, I think if you were pressed to say, well, who's the star of Rogue One, you'd not only have a hard time deciding who it was, but I think everybody would give you a different answer. I think there were a number of great performances there, but it really was an ensemble piece, and ensemble pieces are a little bit harder, I think, of a wide sell. Also, I think there's a little bit of a blowback from The Force Awakens, with some people saying, I'm not going to fall for this twice. And I think that Rogue One, hopefully a number of people will discover how much better it is than The Force Awakens on streaming. Then Patriots Day, that came in next. This was expected to be the best performer of the new releases, because I don't know why, because Deepwater Horizon didn't do particularly well, from the same creative team. Mark Wahlberg in front of the camera, Peter Berg behind it, but people felt Patriots Day was going to hit. This had a strange a strange amount of buzz, when it first opened in limited release. All these critics were like, oh, it's a big awards contender. Patriots Day is one of the best movies of the year. And I think everybody was like, what? And it never materialized. The buzz just couldn't get it there. So it didn't get there with awards season. We'll see what happens with the Oscars. And it didn't get there with the box office. I think that Mark Wahlberg and Peter Berg might want to consider stop working together. They had a hit with Lone Survivor financially. That didn't do well with awards season either, even though it was supposed to be. Lone Survivor, forever the movie where someone's girlfriend sat through the whole movie on her giant iPad on Facebook, and he didn't say anything to her. But he was a really big, scary guy, so nobody said anything to him. All right, so anyway, Deepwater Horizon, not a success in any capacity. And even though I liked all of these, I haven't seen Patriots Day yet, but I liked both those other movies. I think also the Patriots Day subject matter might be a tough sell. That might be something that, something like Sully, oh, yay, everything turned out great. Patriots Day, of course, is quite tragic, and that might be a movie that people just don't think seems like a great night out. Then Monster Trucks, this was brilliant because Paramount, before 2016 ended, wrote off $115 million for the movie. It couldn't possibly have ever been as bad as that set it up to be. So it ended up being like, not bad. People felt Monster Trucks wasn't a total embarrassment, even though it did open in 7th place. Everybody should write off their movie for $115 million to head off that negative conversation. Then Sleepless, speaking of negative conversation, this is the lowest opening for Jamie Foxx since The Soloist back in 2009. That's right, The Soloist, the movie that you forgot existed until I just mentioned it. So that's unfortunate for Jamie Foxx, boy. All right, so I don't know how he's going to recover from that. I put him on my, I made my Green Lantern list, and Jamie Foxx was on it. But now I think he'd be like, I'd love to do a DC movie. I'm in the perfect position to have to take that kind of risk, but I don't know if DC can afford the risk. Then Underworld fell 55% in its second weekend. Ooh, that's bad. The Underworld Awakening, the previous installment, fell 51% in its second weekend, but it had a stronger starting point. So I think things do not look good for the continuation of this franchise. For Underworld 6. Then rounding out the top 10 is Passengers, which a number of you are very happy to see is doing not bad worldwide. I got a lot of tweets about this over the weekend. And even domestically, it's tantalizingly close to the century mark, which again is that first badge of honor that a movie needs to succeed to be seen as a success at the box office. But worldwide, it's a $237. It cost $110 to make prior to advertising. So that doesn't include advertising. But just from a budgetary perspective, it has broken even at this point. So that's pretty good. And I saw some people over the weekend, some articles saying, oh, Passengers is the most successful original live action film of the year, beating out Central Intelligence. And it's like, come on, that's a lot of qualifiers. I don't think Passengers is anywhere what it should have been, but at least it's no longer an embarrassment. And I think that Sony can say that it broke even. I think by the time everything's said and done, it will break even totally, including advertising. And then I think it's going to do great on streaming. And I also think in like hotels, on airplanes, who isn't going to want to watch Chris Pratt and Jennifer Lawrence? I think, I'm sure is contractually obligated Jennifer Lawrence and Chris Pratt, right? She gets top billing. But I think that that's where they're going to really earn their money. They were paid considerably for that film, as we've discussed. And so I think that that's where their star power will pay off. And I think eventually that film will be a moneymaker for Sony. Then, we got to go outside of the top 10 for two of the other big movies of the weekend, and it's embarrassing. Live by Night couldn't even crack the top 10, and that's playing in almost 3,000 theaters. That's really bad. So that's very wide. That's almost as wide as you can get. 4,000 is reserved for like comic book movies and blockbusters. But it had a 33% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is just devastating. Now, I haven't seen the movie. I don't know if it's really just that bad or if this is repercussions of being part of the DCEU. But, Ben Affleck was, really a critical darling for quite some time, and now all of a sudden that has evaporated. I also think part of the problem is it's the Boardwalk Empire effect. That kind of gangster in the 1920s has already been very much put into pop culture for years because of Boardwalk Empire, and I think it's just really hard to revisit that material because of that. Then Martin Scorsese's Silence opened at number 16. Now this was in under 1,000 theaters. It really didn't go quite wide. And it has an 84% on Rotten Tomatoes, but for Scorsese, that's pretty damning. But I think the real problem here is that it's a 3-hour movie and it didn't materialize during awards season. It didn't get any nominations. So you really kind of need the Golden Globes, et cetera, like SAG Awards, the Writers Guild, the Directors Guild, the Producers Guild. Nobody's vouched for this movie. And I think for that kind of 3-hour commitment, you need someone to vouch. I actually saw Silence over the weekend. It's like Fences. You got to really commit. You got to really pay attention. But I found the film to actually be pretty rewarding. Very interesting viewpoint on religion. It's been an interesting weekend for religion, both with Silence and the Young Pope. So anyway, the Young Pope, jury's still out on that as far as I'm concerned. But I think overall, the takeaway here is there are too many movies that are being released. I think the media is no longer supportive of film. Media used to work really hard. I'm not just talking about movie critics. I'm talking about the articles that are written about movies that are releasing. And they used to try to be like, hey, you should see this movie, and this is why maybe this movie might be for you. But I think negative press rules these days. It rules in many different areas, not just entertainment, but it's permeated the entertainment media as well. Then also, I think movie theaters have become increasingly, a bad experience in terms of cleanliness, the behavior of other people in the audience. I think that's a factor. And then also I think TV has become extremely aggressive in counter-programming. It used to be only small movies counter-program, but now TV has come in, they release whole seasons at once, and they take out an entire weekend. And it's difficult out there. It's scary. And I think that's why, just think to yourself, of all these movies that came out this weekend that you didn't see, how many might you have seen if it had been available to you on streaming, let's say 2 weeks after release? Now, it would have been probably for around $50, but think about it if you're a couple or if you're a family. Even if you're just a couple, or even just if you have some friends over, you already make your money back considering, the cost to get to the theater and also the time, snacks, all that stuff. I think people will really go for that option. Then for this coming weekend, it's a tight race for number one between the return of Xander Cage and the return of M. Night Shyamalan, who's going to see if he can repeat his success, his return to form with The Visit from last year, and this time with Split with James McAvoy. So as you can see, it's a neck-and-neck photo finish we'll be looking at. And then The Founder finally comes out. Poor Jeremy Renner. I remember reading an article just a couple of weeks ago where he was like, Harvey Weinstein promised me he was going to make The Founder awards contender, and that did not happen. I don't know what's going on with Harvey Weinstein. Gold also did not materialize as an awards contender. Lion got through the cracks, but Harvey Weinstein seems to no longer be the Oscar heavyweight he once was. So The Founder is expected to open with just $6 million. So anyway, that's this week's Movie Math. Thank you so much for going over the box office with me. I hope you had as much fun as I did, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts about it down below, as well as what movie you plan to see this coming weekend. And it doesn't have to be one of the new ones. You can double back and save one of these poor other suffering movies. I feel like one of those save the whales, ads. Like for just $20, you can save one of these movies. All right, write your thoughts down below, and you can check out some other episodes right now.